The train bound for Busan Station is departing shortly.
Requesting medical assistance in car number 11.
What the? Get back! Get back, all of you! Shut the door! Sweetie, please stay right here, okay? Nobody's here. Get back! Move! Hurry up, kids! We have to depart right now!
No, we can't leave yet!
Which car?
Car number 13, and please hurry!
After the tunnel. Now! Are you even aware of what we are faced with? Why did you? We could have saved them. Train to Busan.
What if I told you Train to Busan 2016 is more than just a zombie movie? From heartbreaking moments to hidden facts that shocked fans worldwide, welcome to Kako Film, where every movie has a deeper story behind it. Train to Busan 2016 is a South Korean action horror movie directed by Yoon Sang Ho and written by Park Joo Suk. The movie stars Gong Yoo Jung, Ma Dong Seok, Kim Soo-an, Choi Woo-shik, An So-hee, and Kim Ui-sang. Most of the story takes place on a fast train called the KTX, traveling from Seoul to Busan, while a sudden zombie outbreak spreads across the country and puts all the passengers in danger. The movie was made together by Next Entertainment World and Red Peter Film. It first premiered on May 13, 2016, at the Cannes Film Festival in the midnight screening section. Later, it was officially released in South Korea on July 20, 2016. The film quickly became extremely popular and by August 7 became the first Korean movie of that year to reach more than 10 million moviegoers in theaters. Train to Busan received very positive reviews from both critics and audiences. People praised the movie for its emotional story, intense action scenes, strong performances, and fast paced suspense. The film was also a huge success at the box office, earning around $98.5 million worldwide, while its production budget was only about $8.5 million. Because of its popularity and success, the movie later became part of the Train to Busan series. It was followed by an animated prequel called Seoul Station 2016 and a standalone sequel named Peninsula 2020. The story begins when a deer is hit by a truck on the road. After the truck leaves, the deer suddenly comes back to life as a zombie, showing that something dangerous is spreading. In Seoul, a busy and selfish fund manager named Seok Woo lives with his young daughter Suan. Because he spends most of his time working, he has become distant from her after his divorce. On Soon's birthday, he accidentally gives her the same present he had already given before and also misses her school recital where she sings the Hawaiian song Aloha Oe. Wanting to make her happy, he finally agrees to take her to Busan so she can visit her mother. The next morning, Sioku and Suwon board the KTX 101 train traveling from Seoul to Busan. Many other passengers are also on the train, including a strong working class man named Sang Hwa and his pregnant wife Seong Hong, a selfish businessman named Yeon Suk, a high school baseball team with player Yong Guk and his girlfriend Jin Hee, two elderly sisters named In-gil and Jong-gil, and a homeless man suffering from trauma. Just before the train leaves, an injured woman secretly enters the train without anyone noticing. News reports begin showing that a violent outbreak is spreading across the country. Suddenly, the injured woman transforms into a zombie and attacks a train attendant, causing the infection to spread rapidly through the train. The passengers panic and run into different train carriages while trying to escape the zombies. They manage to lock some doors to slow the infected people down. The train passes Kyonan station and heads toward Daejeon station, where soldiers have supposedly been sent to control the situation. Seok Woo receives a phone call saying that his company has arranged a rescue team for him and Suwan. However, when the passengers get off at Daejeon, they discover that the soldiers and rescue teams have already become zombies. Everyone rushes back onto the train in fear, and many people become separated during the chaos. The train conductor announces that all future stops have been cancelled except for Busan, where a military quarantine zone has been set up. CEO Ku Sanghwa and Yongguk decide to fight through the zombie-filled train to reunite with Suan, Seong, Kyong, the elderly sisters, and the homeless man trapped in another carriage. They use weapons and work together to survive. However, when they finally reach the safe carriage, the frightened passengers refuse to let them inside because they fear they may be infected. While trying to force the door open, Sanghua is bitten by a zombie. Before sacrificing himself to protect the others, he asks Sioku to take care of his wife and their unborn daughter, whom he wants to name Yoon Soo Yoon. Sadly, Ingil becomes separated during the struggle. Inside the carriage, Yeon-suk and the other passengers force Sioku's group into a small front area away from everyone else. Jongil becomes angry and heartbroken after seeing how selfish the passengers were, especially after her sister died because nobody helped them. In anger, she opens the door and allows the zombies to enter, killing most of the remaining passengers. Around this time, Seok Woo learns through a phone call that his own company may have indirectly caused the outbreak. Yeon-suk and a train attendant named Ki Chul survive by hiding in a bathroom. Later, the train is forced to stop near Dongdaegu station because the tracks ahead are blocked. The train driver leaves to search for another working train while Yeon-suk selfishly pushes Ki Chul toward the zombies to save himself. Soon after, a burning train crashes into several zombie filled carriages, causing massive destruction. Seok Woo, Suan, Seong Kyung, and the homeless man become trapped under a fallen train carriage. Yongguk and Jinhee get separated from the group and are later used as bait by Yeonsuk while he escapes onto another train. The train conductor manages to start a new train on a different track and tries helping the injured Yon Suk, but he is attacked and killed by zombies. Meanwhile, the homeless man sacrifices himself so Seok Woo, Suan, and Seong Kyung can escape safely. The three survivors finally board the new train, but they soon discover that Yon Suk has already been infected. Before fully turning into a zombie, and later it was rewritten. He desperately begs them for help. Sioku fights him, but during the struggle, his hand is bitten. Realizing he will soon become infected, Sioku places Suan and Seong Kyung safely inside the engine room. He teaches Seong Kyong how to drive the train and says an emotional goodbye to Suan. Before completely turning into a zombie, Seok Woo remembers the moment Suan was born and then sacrifices himself by jumping off the train. In the final moments, Suan and Seong Kyong reach a tunnel near Busan where the military has set up a blockade filled with dead bodies and barbed wire. As they slowly walk through the dark tunnel, Suan sings Aloha Oi, the same song she once performed for her father. The soldiers hear her singing and realize they are survivors, not zombies. Suan and Seong Kyong are finally rescued and taken to safety. Gong Yoo as Seok Woo. At the heart of Train to Busan stands Gong Yoo as Seok Woo, a workaholic fund manager whose emotional neglect of his daughter Suan becomes the film's central human crisis against the backdrop of a catastrophic zombie outbreak. Gong Yoo's casting in the role was one of the most inspired decisions director Yeon Sang-ho made during the film's development, and later it was transforming what could be a straightforward genre protagonist into one of the most compelling and emotionally nuanced characters in the history of Korean cinema. Gong Yoo was already one of the most beloved and respected actors in South Korea at the time of the film's production. His work in the enormously popular television drama Coffee Prince 2007 had established him as one of the country's most charismatic leading men, and his subsequent film and television work had demonstrated film a dramatic range and an emotional intelligence that went considerably beyond the romantic lead archetype with which he had first become associated. His selection for the role of Seok Woo reflected Yeon Sang-ho's desire to anchor the film's horror genre framework in genuine human drama. To ensure that the zombie apocalypse unfolding around the characters was experienced through the specific lens of a man confronting his own moral and emotional failures in the most extreme possible circumstances. What Gong Yoo brings to Seokwo is a quality of controlled, internalized conflict that gives the character an immediate and powerful screen presence without resorting to explicit emotional display. His Sioka Wu is a man who has built his identity around professional success and self sufficiency, who has told himself that providing financially for his daughter constitutes adequate fatherhood, and whose dawning recognition that this self justification is inadequate is communicated through extraordinarily subtle shifts in his physical demeanor and emotional availability. The specific quality of Gong Yoo's performance in the film's earlier sequences, the careful, almost clinical emotional distance he maintains from everyone around him, including his own daughter, establishes the character's starting point with such precision that every subsequent step in his arc carries genuine dramatic weight. The physical demands of the role were considerable. The film's action sequences, the frantic claustrophobic combat in the train's narrow corridors, the desperate sprints through zombie infested stations required Gong Yu to perform at a level of physical intensity and commitment that placed extraordinary demands on his body across weeks of intensive filming. His willingness to perform the majority of his own physical work gave the action sequences an authenticity and an urgency that stunt only performances could not have replicated. The specific quality of Siyoku's physical courage, the protective ferocity of a father who discovers that he is capable of extraordinary violence in defense of his child, is entirely the product of Gong Yu's physical commitment and his genuine emotional investment in the character's arc. The film's climactic sequences, in which Seokwo's sacrifice completes the transformation that the entire narrative has been building toward, represent some of the most emotionally devastating work in Gong Yu's career. His ability to communicate the specific quality of a man who has finally understood what matters most at precisely the moment when he has lost the ability to act on that understanding gave the film's ending a heartbreaking power that resonated deeply with audiences around the world. Ma Dong-seok as Sang-hwa, if Gong Yoo Seok-woo provides the film with its primary emotional arc, Ma Dong-seok's Sang-hwa provides it with its most immediately beloved and most purely entertaining screen presence. Ma Dong-seok, known internationally as Don Lee, plays Sang-hwa, a burly, working class man traveling with his heavily pregnant wife Seong Kyung. And his performance is one of the great supporting turns in contemporary Korean cinema. A portrayal of uncomplicated goodness, physical power, and fierce protective instinct that makes the character instantly and completely lovable. Ma Dong-seok's casting drew on the specific casting quality of physical presence and natural charisma that had made him one of the most recognizable character actors in South Korean film and television. His enormous physical stature, he is considerably larger than the average Korean actor, and his specific combination of gentle expressiveness and genuine physical power gave Sangwa a quality of reassuring solidity that was essential to the character's function within the ensemble. Sangwa is the film's most immediately capable physical presence in a crisis, and Ma Jong-sik's authentic physicality, rooted in a genuine background in combat sports and physical training, gave that capability a credibility that was immediately evident on screen. What makes Ma Dong-seok's performance genuinely exceptional, however, is not his physical presence but his emotional warmth. Sang-hwa's love for his pregnant wife, his immediate and uncomplicated willingness to help strangers in danger, and his specific quality of working class directness and moral clarity. His refusal to engage in the calculations of self interest that motivate many of the film's less sympathetic characters are all communicated through a performance of remarkable generosity and naturalistic ease. His scenes with Gong Yoo Seok-woo carry a specific dynamic of masculine affection and mutual respect that develops with beautiful economy across the film's runtime. And the emotional impacts of Sang Hwa's eventual fate is entirely the product of Ma Dong-seok's ability to make the character so genuinely lovable that his loss feels like a personal bereavement for the audience. The fight sequences featuring Sangwa are among the film's most viscerally exciting, and Ma Dong-seok's authentic physical capability, his ability to throw punches and perform combat movements with genuine power and precision, gave those sequences a quality of thrilling, overwhelming force that was entirely appropriate to the character's almost superhuman physical presence within the film's world. Jung Yumi as Seong Kyung. Jung Yumi's portrait of Seong Kyung, Sanghwa's heavily pregnant wife, whose survival becomes one of the film's most urgent dramatic imperatives, is one of the most quietly powerful performances in the entire ensemble. Jung Yumi, who had established herself as one of the most versatile and consistently impressive actresses in South Korean cinema through her work in films like Kim Ji Young, born 1982, and various other acclaimed productions, brought to Song Kyung a combination of genuine vulnerability, fierce internal strength, and extraordinary emotional intelligence that made the character one of the film's most fully realized and most affecting presences. The specific challenge of the role, performing a heavily pregnant woman in extreme physical danger across a sustained narrative of extraordinary intensity, demanded from Young Yumi both physical commitment and a careful emotional calibrating that maintained the character's vulnerability without reducing her to a passive victim. Her Seong Kyong is a woman of genuine courage and genuine resourcefulness who is temporarily limited by her physical condition but who responds to that limitation with intelligence and determination rather than helpless dependency. Jung Yoo Mi navigated this balance with remarkable skill, creating a character whose pregnancy felt like a genuine physical reality rather than a narrative device, and whose emotional responses to the unfolding horror felt completely specific and completely convincing. Her scenes with Ma Dong-seok carry a genuine marital warmth and tenderness that gave the Sang-hwa and Seong-kyung relationship series the most immediately convincing emotional reality of any relationship in the film. A quality of long, com- comfortable love and genuine partnership that was communicated through the specific ease and naturalness of the two actors' interaction rather than through explicit romantic statement. Kim Soo-an as Soo-an. The casting of child actress Kim Soo-an as Seok Woo's young daughter Soo-an was one of the most critically important decisions of the entire production, and her performance is one of the most remarkable child performances in the history of Korean cinema. Suwan in later was rewritten. Suwan is the film's moral center, the character whose purity of feeling and whose uncompromising demand for genuine human connection drives her father's emotional arc. And Kim Suwan inhabited the role with a naturalness and an emotional truthfulness that made her performance genuinely extraordinary. The Kim Suwan was approximately 10 years old at the time of filming, and her ability to sustain the emotional complexity of Su-an's journey across what was clearly a physically and emotionally demanding production speaks to a genuine acting talent of very unusual quality. Her scenes with Gong Yoo are the film's most emotionally intimate, and the specific quality of their developing dynamic, the gradual rebuilding of the trust and genuine connection between a daughter and a father, between a daughter and who has not been sufficiently present, required both performers to find emotional honesty across multiple scenes filmed in the challenging pressured environment of an intensive production. The film's opening sequence, in which Su-an performs a song for her father's work colleagues, right? Only to realize that he has barely paid attention, is one of the most heartbreaking images of neglected childhood in recent Korean cinema. And Kim Soo-an's performance of that moment communicates its emotional content with devastating simplicity. Her subsequent scenes throughout the film, her relationship with Sangwa and Seong Kyung, her interactions with the other passengers, and above all, her final scene in the film's extraordinary conclusion demonstrate a consistent emotional intelligence and a specific quality of unaffected truthfulness that place her performance among the finest in the film. Choi Woo Shik as young Guk Choi Woo Shik, who would subsequently achieve enormous international recognition through his Academy Award winning performance in Bong Joon Ho's Parasite 2019, appeared in Train to Busan as young Guk, a high school baseball player who's developing feelings for his classmate Jin Hee, give the film an important additional emotional dimension. Choi's performance captures the specific quality of teenage uncertainty and nascent courage with a naturalness and a specificity that made Young-guk one of the film's most immediately sympathetic characters. His chemistry with Ah An So-hee's Jin Hee carries the specific awkward tenderness of first love, not yet fully articulated, expressed primarily through protective instinct and the small, and later it was rewritten, hesitant gestures of someone learning to prioritize another person's well being over their own fear. The teenage romantic subplot provides the film with an important emotional counterpoint to the adult relationships that dominate its center, and Choi Woo-shik's performance gives it sufficient credibility and genuine feeling to register emotionally rather than simply serving as a genre convention. Ans To-hee as Jin Hee To-hee, Fritan, who had established herself primarily as a member of the popular K-pop group Wonder Girls before transitioning to acting, brought genuine screen presence and emotional sensitivity to the role of Jin Hee, young Gook's classmate and the object of his tentative affection. Her performance demonstrated a naturalness and an emotional directness that suggested an actress of real potential, And her scenes with Choi Woo-shik carried her scenes with specific quality of unspoken feeling and mutual vulnerability that gave the teenage relationship genuine emotional resonance. Kim Yoo-sung as Yeon-suk. Kim Yoo-sung's portrayal of Yeon-suk, the film's primary human antagonist, a self serving businessman whose instinct for self preservation at the expense of others represents the darkest dimensions of human nature under crisis, is one of the most effectively realized villain performances in Korean genre cinema. Yeon Suk is not a supernatural threat or an ideological monster. He is simply a man whose essential selfishness, normally contained by the structures of civilized society, is stripped bare by the crisis in ways that make him more immediately dangerous than the zombies surrounding him. Kim Yoo Sung played the character's cowardice and his ruthless self interest with a specificity and a commitment that generated genuine audience revulsion, one of the most fundamental tests of a villain performance in popular cinema. His Yon Suk is not cartoonishly evil, but recognizably disturbingly human in his failures. A man who rationalizes his betrayals to himself even as he commits them, whose capacity for self deception is as terrifying as his capacity for harm. The specific quality of Kim Awi Sung's performance, the way he communicates Yeon Suk's internal self justification alongside his external callousness, gave the character a psychological complexity that made him genuinely disturbing in ways that a more simply conceived villain could not have achieved. Choi Gui-hwa as the homeless man Gui-hwa delivered one of the film's most quietly affecting supporting performances as the unnamed homeless man who serves as an early warning of the outbreak's moral complexity. His character's specific function in the narrative as a witness to the initial stages of the outbreak who carries a quality of tragic foreknowledge was handled with a restraint and a specific emotional weight that gave the character genuine dignity and significance despite his limited screen time. Choi Gui-hawa found within the role a quality of accumulated suffering and weary resignation that made the homeless man one of the film's most humanly observed minor characters. Ensemble, the ensemble's collective achievement, the casting of Train to Busan as a whole, represents one of the most carefully considered and most successfully realized ensemble decisions in the history of Korean genre cinema. Director Yeon Sang-ho assembled a cast in which every role, from Gong Yoo's emotionally complex protagonist to Kim Soo-an's extraordinarily naturalistic child performance to Ma Dong-seok's immediately beloved working-class hero to Kim Yoo-sung's disturbingly recognizable human villain, was filled with a performer who brought genuine craft, specific personality, and complete emotional commitment to the material. The Red was a film whose horror genre framework was elevated into something of considerably greater cultural and emotional significance by the quality of the human drama at its center. The zombie outbreak in Train to Busan functions not as an end in itself, but as the catalyst that strips away the social conventions and comfortable self deceptions that normally mediate human interaction, IG revealing the essential moral character with brutal clarity. The casting's great achievement was the creation of an ensemble sufficiently varied in its human types. The neglectful father, the uncompromising working man, the pregnant woman, the innocent child, the teenagers in love, the ruthless opportunist, to give that moral revelation its fullest possible dramatic range and its most complete emotional impact. Train to Busan stands as one of the great ensemble films of contemporary Asian cinema, a film whose extraordinary genre effectiveness is inseparable from the extraordinary quality of the human performances that give it its genuine emotional power and its lasting cultural resonance. Production, development, and pre production, the story of how Train to Busan came to exist as a feature film is itself a remarkable narrative about creative evolution. The willingness to pursue an unexpected artistic direction and the extraordinary vision of a filmmaker making the extraordinary vision of action debut after establishing himself in an entirely different medium. Director Yeon Sang-ho had built his reputation in South Korean cinema through a series of acclaimed animated films, most notably The King of Pigs 2011 and The Fake 2013. Dark. Socially critical works that had earned considerable critical recognition for their unflinching examination of Korean society as class structures, moral hypocrisies, and systemic failures. These animated films were known for their brutality and their willingness to portray human nature without sentimentality or consolation, qualities that would ultimately prove entirely consistent with the vision that animated Train to Busan. Even as the shift to live action genre filmmaking represented a dramatic departure from the animated social realism of his earlier work. The genesis of Train to Busan lay in Yeon Sang Ho's desire to explore the themes of social class, human selfishness, and systemic failure that had defined his animated work through the vehicle of a mainstream genre film, specifically the zombie horror genre, which he recognized as providing an extraordinarily effective framework for social criticism. Precisely because its extreme premise strips away the comfortable mediations of ordinary social life and forces characters to reveal their essential moral nature under conditions of absolute crisis. The zombie genre had long served as a vehicle for social commentary in cinema, from George Romero's foundational works, which used the zombie outbreak as a lens through which to examine American consumerism, racism, and militarism, to Danny Boyle's 28 Days Later, 2002, and its examination of societal collapse. And Yeon Sang-ho's decision to work within that tradition while giving it a specifically Korean social and cultural dimension was a creative choice of genuine intelligence and originality. The specific setting of the film, a high speed KTX train traveling from Seoul to Busan, was one of the production's most inspired conceptual decisions and one that had profound implications for every aspect of the film's creative development. The train setting served multiple creative functions simultaneously. It created the claustrophobic contained environment essential to the horror genre's ability to generate sustained tension and dread. A world of narrow corridors, locked doors, and later it was rewritten, and limited escape options that maximized the physical threat of the zombie outbreak and prevented characters from simply running away from danger. It provided a natural narrative structure, the journey from departure to destination, giving the story a built in dramatic arc with a clear spatial and temporal logic. And it created an extraordinarily rich social microcosm. The passengers of the train representing a cross section of Korean society from wealthy businessmen to working class laborers. The script, and later it was rewritten from high school students to pregnant women to elderly sisters, whose different social positions and different values would be tested and revealed by the crisis unfolding around them. The screenplay was written by Park Joo-suk, an experienced Korean screenwriter who worked closely with Yeon Sang-ho to develop the story and characters that the director had conceived. Their collaboration was defined by a shared commitment to ensuring that the social commentary dimension of the material was fully integrated into the genre framework rather than simply layered on top of it. That the film's examination of class, selfishness, and systemic failure emerged organically from the characters and their interactions rather than being imposed through explicit statement. The central character of Sioku was developed as the film's primary vehicle for this social examination. A fund manager whose professional role in the Korean financial system makes him complicit in the systemic failures that the zombie outbreak allegorically represents, and whose personal failures as a father reflect the broader, more failures of a society that has allowed the pursuit of individual success to displace genuine human connection and communal responsibility. The screenplay's most important structural decision was the choice to anchor the film's emotional center in the father daughter relationship between Seok Woo and Suan. This relationship gave the film its primary emotional through line, the personal stakes that grounded the broader social commentary in immediate human experience, and it gave the film's conclusion its devastating power. The specific quality of Seok Woo's neglect of Suan, his physical presence alongside his emotional absence, his substitution of material provision for genuine parental engagement, was developed as a specific critique of the kind of success oriented Korean masculinity that the character embodied, making his eventual sacrifice not merely a genre convention, but a genuine moral reckoning with the limitations of the worldview he had previously inhabited. The development of the film's zombie design and the rules governing the outbreak was another critical aspect of pre-production process. Yeon Sang-ho and his creative team made several specific decisions about the nature of the zombies that distinguished them from conventional genre precedents in ways that served both the film's horror effectiveness and its thematic concerns. The decision to make the zombies extraordinarily fast, capable of sprinting, of climbing, of overwhelming opponents through sheer numbers and relentless physical aggression gave the film a quality of kinetic urgency that differentiated it from the slower moving zombie traditions of Romero's films and gave the action sequences a breathless, overwhelming quality. The further decision to make the zombies temporarily unable to function in darkness, a behavioral rule that became one of the film's most important plot mechanisms, gave the narrative a specific physical logic that could be used to create both tension and resolution across multiple sequences. The decision to make the zombies retain a quality of partial humanity, to give them moments of something approaching recognition or response to the people they had been before their transformation, was one of the film's most emotionally complex creative choices. These moments of quasi human recognition, most notably in the sequence involving a character whose husband has been turned, gave the outbreak a dimension of personal tragedy that conventional zombie narratives often elide, adding emotional depth to what might otherwise have been purely physical threat. The production design work was extensive and technically demanding. The film's primary setting, the interior of a KTX high speed train, needed to feel simultaneously authentic and dramatically functional. With the narrow corridors, the train car interiors, the script, and the connecting vestibules between cars all serving as action environments of considerable complexity. Production designer Lee Mokwon worked with the production team to develop a design approach that honored the actual physical characteristics of KTX train cars while creating environments that could accommodate the elaborate action sequences and the large cast of characters that the script required. The casting process was undertaken with the understanding that the film's success depended entirely on the quality of the human performances within the genre framework. Yeon Sang-ho was explicit in his view that Train to Busan needed to function as genuine human drama as much as zombie horror, that the horror genre framework was a vehicle for exploring genuine human experiences and genuine social realities rather than an end in itself. This conviction shaped every casting decision, with the director seeking performers of genuine dramatic capability who could give the film's characters the specific human weight and emotional reality that his vision required. The confirmation of Gong Yoo in the lead role of Seok Woo was the casting decision that most clearly established the film's dramatic ambitions. Gong Yoo's status as one of South Korea's most beloved and respected actors, and his specific qualities as a performer, his emotional intelligence, his ability to communicate internal conflict through restraint and understatement, made him the ideal anchor for a film whose success depended on the audience's complete investment in its central character's moral and emotional journey. The subsequent castings of Ma Dong as Sangwa, Jung Yumi as Jung Kyung, Kim Suan as Suan, and Kim Yui Sung as Yeon Suk completed an ensemble that represented some of the finest talent in contemporary Korean cinema, assembled in service of a project of genuine creative ambition. The budget for Train to Busan was approximately 5 billion Korean won, equivalent to approximately $7 to $8 million US dollars at the time of production, a figure that was modest by the standards of comparable Hollywood genre production, but that represented a significant investment for a Korean genre film and that reflected the confidence of the production company Next Entertainment World in the project's commercial and artistic potential. The management of this budget across the demanding physical production that the film required was one of the central logistical challenges of the entire project. Filming principal Paul photography on Train to Busan took place in 2015, with the production conducted primarily across South Korea. The filming process was one of the most physically demanding in recent Korean cinema. The combination of the confined train setting, the large cast, the elaborate action sequences, and the specific technical requirements of zombie horror filmmaking placed extraordinary demands on every department and required innovative solutions to a series of logistical challenges that had no obvious precedent in Korean genre filmmaking. The filming inside actual KTX train cars presented the production's most fundamental logistical challenge. Real KTX trains were used for portions of the filming, providing the authentic physical environment that the film's realist aesthetic demanded. But the narrow confines of the train car interiors created enormous difficulties for camera placement, lighting, sound recording, and sound recognition of the large cast and crew. And later it was rewritten. The specific dimensions of the train car corridors, barely wide enough for two people to pass each other, meant that conventional filmmaking approaches were simply impossible, requiring the camera team to develop highly inventive solutions for capturing the action within the physical constraints of the environment. Director of photography Lee Hyung-deok, whose work on Train to Busan was one of the most technically accomplished pieces of cinematography in Korean genre cinema of that period, developed a visual approach to the confined train environment that turned its limitations into creative advantages. The narrow corridors and low ceilings that made conventional camera setups impossible became the foundation for a claustrophobic visual language that perfectly complemented the horror genre's requirements for sustained tension and physical immediacy. Lee's use of handheld camera work, maintained with sufficient control to remain readable even in the most chaotic action sequences, gave the train sequences a quality of physical urgency and visceral immediacy that was essential to the film's effectiveness as a horror experience. The lighting of the train interiors required particular ingenuity. The overhead fluorescent lighting of actual KTX cars, efficient for passenger use but dramatically flat for filmmaking purposes, needed to be supplemented and modified to create the specific quality of harsh, revealing light that the horror sequences demanded while maintaining sufficient authenticity to preserve the visual credibility of the environment. Lee and the electrical department developed a lighting approach that used the practical overhead lighting as a foundation while adding carefully positioned supplementary sources that created the dramatic shadows and high contrast illumination that distinguished the film's visual language. The filming of the zombie transformation sequences, the moments in which characters are bitten and begin their rapid convulsive transformation into the undead required both technical precision and genuine physical commitment from the performers undertaking the transformations. The specific movement vocabulary of the film Zombies, the hyperextended joints, the unnatural spinal contortions, the jerky mechanical quality of the undead locomotion was developed through extensive rehearsal with a movement coordinator who worked with both the zombie extras and the principal cast members who underwent transformation on screen. The physical demands of this movement vocabulary were considerable. The contorted positions required of zombie performers placed genuine strain on joints and muscles, and the commitment of the performers to sustaining these positions across multiple takes and angles was a significant physical achievement. The zombie extras represented one of the production's most significant logistical undertakings. The film required hundreds of performers to portray the undead across its various sequences, and each of these performers needed to be trained in the specific movement vocabulary of the film's zombie design, costumed and made up appropriately, and coordinated effectively within the complex staging of the action sequences. The coordination of large numbers of zombie extras in the confined environment of the train, where the physical space was already severely limited by the dimensions of the cars, required extraordinary choreographic precision and careful safety management. The action sequences choreographed stunt team that worked closely with Yeon Sang Ho and the principal cast to develop fight movement sequences appropriate to each character's specific physical capabilities and narrative situation. Madong Seok Sangwa sequences, in which the character's enormous physical strength is deployed against the zombie hordes with overwhelming force, were choreographed to maximize the impact of Madong Seok's genuine physicality, with the fight sequences designed specifically around his authentic combat sports background and his specific physical characteristics. The contrast between Sangwa's overwhelming force and the more desperate, improvised quality of Seok-woo's physical encounters with the zombies was a deliberate choreographic choice that reinforced the characters' different relationships to physical capability and reflected their different class positions and life experiences. Gong Yoo's physical preparation for the film was extensive. His transformation from the carefully groomed, physically restrained presence of Seok was professional life to the desperate, exhausted survivor of the film's later sequences required both physical conditioning and a specific physical vocabulary appropriate to each stage of the character's journey. His commitment to performing the majority of the film's action sequences himself, the running, the fighting, the f- the physical protection of his daughter gave those sequences an authenticity that was essential to the character's emotional credibility. Since the physical reality of a father fighting for his child's survival needed to feel genuinely effortful and genuinely costly to carry the dramatic weight the story required. Kim Suan's filming experience as the child actress at the center of the production required special care and attention from the director and the entire production team. Script and later it was rewritten. The emotional and physical demands of the role, the sustained fear of the zombie sequences, the genuine emotional complexity of the father daughter relationship, the physical demands of the action sequences were extraordinary for a performer of her age, and Yeon Sang-ho's management of her experience on set reflected a genuine concern for her well-being alongside a clear understanding of the specific quality of naturalistic emotional truth that her performance needed to achieve. The result was a child performance of remarkable authenticity, a quality of unaffected emotional response that could only be achieved by a director who had created the conditions for genuine rather than performed feeling. The filming of the sequences outside the train, the station sequences, the opening and closing New York and Busan sequences, and various exteriors provided the production with a welcome change of physical environment but introduced different logistical challenges. The Sequences involving large numbers of zombie extras in open environments required the same precision of coordination as the confined train sequences while operating at a much larger physical scale. And the management of crowd scenes of this complexity demanded extensive planning and real time coordination between the director, the stunt team, the extras casting team, and the various departmental heads responsible for the visual and technical quality of the footage. The production made extensive use of a specially constructed set that replicated the interior of a KTX train car at full scale, built to allow the camera team the access to the space from multiple angles simultaneously that actual train cars could not provide. This constructed set was one of the production's most significant physical investments and one of its most important creative resources, enabling the filming of the most complex and choreographically demanding sequences with a degree of camera access and compositional control that would have been impossible in the actual train environments. The set was constructed with removable walls and ceiling panels that allowed the camera to be positioned above, below, and at any angle relative to the action, giving Lee Young Diof a range of visual options that transform the claustrophobic constraint of the train interior from a limitation into a source of creative visual possibility. The post production period on Train to Busan was intensive and required the integration of substantial visual effects work with the practical photography to create the film's fully realized zombie world. The visual effects workload was distributed across several Korean visual effects facilities. Later, it was rewritten with the coordination of this pipeline presenting significant organizational challenges given the complexity of the material and the relatively modest budget within which the production was operating. The most significant visual effects challenge of the post production period was the creation of the large scale zombie crowd sequences. The moments in which vast numbers of undead overwhelm the film's various environments with a quantity of bodies that practical extras alone could not have provided. The visual effects team developed a system for digitally multiplying and extending the crowds of practical extras that had been filmed. It was rewritten, creating the illusion of zombie hordes of genuinely overwhelming scale while maintaining the physical authenticity of the individual zombie performances that the practical photography had captured. The seamless integration of the digital crowd extensions with the practical footage required considerable technical skill and careful attention to matching the specific physical qualities of the practical zombie performances in the digital editions. The script and highway sequence in which an enormous mass of zombies piles up against an overturned vehicle in a writhing almost liquid mass of bodies was one of the most technically demanding individual visual effects shots in the production. Creating a convincing simulation of hundreds of human bodies in motion, maintaining the specific physical qualities of the zombie movement vocabulary across the entire mass of digital characters required sophisticated simulation systems and considerable artistic judgment in their application. The sequence is one of the film's most visually striking and most immediately iconic images, and the quality of the visual effects work made it essential to its impact. The visual effects work supporting the zombie transformation sequences, augmenting the practical prosthetics and performance based transformations with digital elements that extended their visual complexity, required careful integration with the practical work to maintain the physical reality and visceral impact of the transformations. The philosophy governing the use of visual effects in these sequences was consistent with the production's broader preference for practical solutions wherever possible. The digital work was used to enhance and extend practical performance rather than to replace it, maintaining the authenticity of physical presence that was central to the film's horror effectiveness. The editing of the film was handled by Yang Jin Mo, one of South Korea's most experienced and accomplished film editors, whose work on numerous major Korean productions had given him a comprehensive understanding of the specific rhythmic and structural requirements of Korean genre cinema. Yang's task was to assemble the film's complex combination of sustained horror tension, intimate character drama, spectacular action sequences, develop the script, and genuine emotional depth into a coherent and propulsive whole that honored all of these different dimensions without sacrificing any of them to the demands of the others. The specific editorial challenge of the film's confined train setting was the management of spatial continuity, maintaining the audience's clear understanding of the train's geography and the relative positions of characters within it across the complex, often rapidly cut action sequences. Young developed a clear editorial approach to the train's spatial logic early in the post production process, establishing consistent spatial relationships between the various train cars and the connecting vestibules that allowed the audience to maintain their geographical bearings throughout even the most chaotic action sequences. The pacing of the film's emotional sequences, particularly the scenes between Gong Yoo Seok-woo and Kim Suan, that constituted the film's primary emotional through line, required careful editorial management to ensure that they had sufficient space to breathe and register without disrupting the momentum of the surrounding horror and action material. Young's editing of these sequences demonstrated a delicate touch and a genuine sensitivity to the specific qualities of the performances, allowing Gong Yu's characteristic restraint and Kim Soo-an's naturalistic emotional truthfulness the time and space they needed to fully communicate the emotional content of their scenes. The color grading of the film, the process of adjusting the color contrast and tonal qualities of the finished footage was handled with a clear understanding of the different emotional registers of the film's various sequences. The relatively normal, sunlit quality of the film's opening sequences gradually gives way to the harsher, more fluorescent quality of the train interior environments, which in turn shifts to the deeper, discrete, more desperate darkness of the film's most intense zombie sequences. This visual progression from the comfortable familiar world of the film's opening to the increasingly alien and threatening world of its interior was one of the color grading's most important contributions to the film's overall emotional and atmospheric architecture. Sound design was one of the most critical and most accomplished elements of the post production work. The specific sounds of the zombie outbreak, the particular quality of the transformation sounds, the specific vocalizations of the undead, the sounds of large scale zombie crowds in motion needed to be developed from scratch with no obvious real world reference touch points and with a clear creative understanding of the specific emotional effects they needed to create. The sound team developed a comprehensive sonic vocabulary for the film's zombie world that was simultaneously viscerally disturbing and physically credible, rooted in processed organic sounds that gave the undead a biological reality while maintaining the specific quality of wrongness and threat that the horror genre demanded. The musical score for Train to Busan was composed by Jang Young-yu, an experienced South Korean film and television composer whose work on the film was one of its most significantly underappreciated creative achievements. Zhang's approach to scoring Train to Busan was shaped by a clear understanding of the dual nature of the material, the need to serve simultaneously as a horror genre score, creating and sustaining the tension and dread that the genre required, and as a genuinely emotional dramatic score, giving the film scrutiny seems human relationships and its central themes the musical depth and resonance they deserved. The central thematic material of the score is built around the father daughter relationship between Seoka Woo and Suwan. A gentle lyrical theme of considerable beauty that serves as the film's emotional anchor and whose various appearances core mark the stages of Syoko Woo's moral and emotional evolution. The theme is introduced in a quiet, slightly melancholy form in the film's opening sequences, reflecting the emotional distance and mutual incomprehension that characterizes the father daughter relationship at the story's beginning. As the narrative progresses and Sioku's understanding of what truly matters deepens through the crisis surrounding him, the theme develops, gaining warmth, gaining urgency, gaining the quality of genuine love that has been present but suppressed throughout his relationship with his daughter until its most complete and most devastating expression in the film's climactic sequences. Jang's management of the score's horror dimension demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of how music creates and sustains psychological tension. Rather than relying on the conventional horror music vocabulary of sudden loud stabs and dissonant orchestral textures, Jang developed a more subtle approach, building tension through gradual dynamic intensification, through the precise timing of musical events relative to the visual and narrative action, and through the specific timbral qualities of the instruments he chose. The use of strings, both conventional orchestral strings and processed string sounds of various kinds, as the primary vehicle for the score's horror dimension, created a quality of physical agitation and mounting dread that worked at the level of visceral sensation rather than conscious musical awareness. The score's treatment of Sanghua and Seongkyung's relationship was another of its most accomplished elements. The musical material associated with this couple carried a warmth and a simplicity, a quality of uncomplicated human love and working class directness that distinguished it clearly from the more complex, conflicted emotional world of Siokuwa's material, and that gave Sangwa's eventual fate the specific quality of loss that made it so devastating. The contrast between the gentle unpretentious quality of the music associated with Sanghawa and the more intense, urgent material of the horror sequence created an effective emotional register that amplified the impact of the film's most heartbreaking moments. The orchestral forces employed in the score were relatively modest, consistent with the film's overall production budget, but Jang used them with considerable efficiency and imagination, creating a sonic world of surprising richness and emotional depth within the constraints of the available resources. The recording of the score was conducted with South Korean session musicians whose professional quality and stylistic versatility gave Jang's compositions the interpretive realization they required, and the finished score was integrated into the film with a precision of timing and a sensitivity to the specific qualities of the performances that made the music and the drama feel genuinely continuous rather than simply coexistent. The film's use of the song that Suan performs in the film's opening, a quiet child-like vocal piece that establishes the emotional baseline of the father-daughter relationship before the crisis begins, was one of the most effective pieces of musical storytelling in the entire film. The simplicity and vulnerability of the child singing, combined with Jeok Woo's distracted, absent response, communicates the essential quality of their relationship with extraordinary economy, and the song's subsequent emotional resonance throughout the film, including its devastating reprise in the final sequence, was one of the score's most powerful creative achievements. Released theatrical, Train to Busan had its world premiere at the Cannes Film Festival in May 2016, screening in the midnight screening section, a section of the festival traditionally dedicated to genre cinema of high quality and genuine creative ambition. The Cannes premiere was a significant moment for the film and for Korean genre cinema more broadly, Later, it was rewritten, representing the first occasion on which a Korean zombie film had been presented at one of the world's most prestigious film festivals. The reception at Cannes was extraordinarily enthusiastic. The film received a standing ovation from the midnight audience that was reported as one of the most extended and passionate of the festival. And the critical response from the international press covering the festival established Train to Busan as one of the most exciting genre films of the year before it had even reached its domestic Korean theatrical release. He taught the domestic South Korean theatrical release followed on July 20, 2016, a summer release date that placed the film in competition with the major Hollywood blockbusters that dominated the Korean theatrical market during the summer season. The decision to release a domestic Korean genre film in the heart of the summer season, rather than seeking a less competitive window, reflected the confidence of the production company and the distributor knew in the film's commercial potential and its ability to compete with Hollywood product at the level of pure entertainment value. The marketing campaign in Korea was carefully designed to communicate the film's dual identity. Its status as a quality production with genuine dramatic ambition alongside its appeal as an exciting, spectacularly entertaining horror genre film. Gong Yoo's involvement as the lead actor was central to the marketing strategy script, and later it was rewritten with the actor's enormous popularity and his specific emotionally resonant dramatic content, helping to position the film as more than simply a genre exercise. The presence of Ma Dong Sok, whose specific physical charisma and natural screen appeal had made him one of the most beloved character actors in Korean cinema, added a different dimension to the marketing, appealing to audiences who might not normally prioritize zombie horror as their preferred genre. Promotional materials emphasize both the entertainment value of the zombie sequences and the emotional depth of the human relationships, creating a marketing identity that accurately that reflected the film's dual nature and that communicated to potential audiences that they could expect both genuine genre excitement and genuine emotional engagement from the theatrical experience. The marketing campaign's effectiveness. The marketing campaign's effectiveness in communicating this dual identity was reflected in the extraordinary breadth of the film's eventual audience, a demographic range that extended from core horror genre fans to family audiences and adult drama viewers who might not normally seek out zombie films. The film received a rating of 15 from the Korean Media Rating Board, equivalent to a PG-15 rating that reflected the intensity of the zombie violence and horror content while confirming the film's accessibility to the broad teenage and adult audience that constituted its primary commercial target. The rating was broadly appropriate to the film's content and did not significantly restrict its commercial reach. The theatrical presentation of the film in South Korea was in standard format across the majority of its exhibition venues, with selected premium format presentations in theaters equipped for enhanced audiovisual experiences. The film's cinematography and sound design both rewarded the enhanced presentation significantly, with the claustrophobic train environments and the zombie crowd sequences delivering a particularly powerful theatrical experience in premium sound environments. The international theatrical release strategy was developed on the basis of the extraordinary reception at Cannes and the immediate commercial performance in South Korea. The film was sold to distributors in numerous international markets, with theatrical releases organized across Asia, North America, Europe, and other territories. The international release strategy varied by market. Some territories received wide theatrical releases, while others were released in limited art house and specialty cinema contexts. But the film's commercial and critical performance consistently exceeded expectations across all markets where it received theatrical distribution. The North American theatrical release was handled by Velgo USA Entertainment, which secured the rights to the film following its Cannes debut and released it in North American theaters in August 2016. The North American release focused on urban markets with significant Asian American populations and on art house and specialty cinema venues that cater to audiences with an established appetite for quality international cinema, building awareness through strong critical notices and enthusiastic word of mouth before expanding to a somewhat broader theatrical footprint. The home media release of Train to Busan in South Korea followed the theatrical run in late 2016, with the film arriving on Blu ray and DVD formats that provided domestic audiences with the opportunity to experience the film's extraordinary qualities in a home setting. The South Korean home media release was accompanied by supplementary content that gave audiences additional insight into the film's production. Behind the scenes documentary material, interviews with the director and cast, and production featurettes exploring the development of the zombie design and the choreography of the action sequences. The Blu ray release was the premium home media product for Korean enthusiasts, with the film's extraordinary cinematography and its impressively detailed production design translating effectively to the high definition format. The enhanced Later it was rewritten. The enhanced audio presentation of the Blu-ray gave home audiences a significantly improved experience of the film's comprehensive sound design. The specific qualities of the zombie vocalizations, the overwhelming sound of large-scale zombie crowds, and the precise dramatic timing of Jang Young-yu's musical score all benefited considerably from the expanded dynamic range and audio fidelity of the Blu-ray format. The international home media releases were coordinated across multiple territories, with distributors in various markets releasing the film on Blu ray and DVD in formats appropriate to their local markets. The North American home media release by Valgo USA Entertainment was particularly significant commercially, reaching a substantially larger audience through home video than had been possible within the constraints of the limited theatrical release. The home video performance of the film in North America demonstrated that its appeal extended well beyond the Asian American audience that had been the primary focus of the theatrical release, with enthusiastic word of mouth from early home video viewers spreading the film's reputation across a much broader demographic. The film's release on major rewritten the film's release on major streaming platforms represent its most commercially significant home entertainment milestone. Its availability on Netflix in multiple territories, including markets where it had not received significant theatrical distribution, introduced the film to an enormous global audience and transformed it from a Korean genre hit with international critical recognition into a genuine global cultural phenomenon. The streaming release on Netflix drove an extraordinary expansion of the film's audience, with viewers across dozens of countries discovering and enthusiastically recommending the film to their own networks, creating a viral spread of enthusiasm that significantly amplified the film's cultural footprint. The Netflix release was particularly important in markets where Korean cinema had limited traditional distribution infrastructure, giving audiences in Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia, and various European territories access to the film that would not have been possible through conventional theatrical or home video distribution. The extraordinary audience response in these markets demonstrated that the film's appeal was genuinely universal, that the combination of exceptional genre entertainment and genuine human drama transcended cultural and linguistic barriers in ways that purely domestic Korean commercial successes rarely achieve. Reception box office the commercial performance of Train to Busan at the South Korean domestic box office was one of the most extraordinary success stories in the history of Korean genre cinema. A film that exceeded all commercial expectations, established new records for the horror genre in the Korean market, and demonstrated conclusively that domestic Korean genre cinema could compete on equal terms with Hollywood blockbusters for the attention of the Korean theatrical audience. The film opened to an extraordinary domestic first weekend performance that immediately established it as a major commercial event. In its opening weekend in South Korea, Train to Busan grossed approximately 4 billion Korean return, a figure that broke the record for the highest grossing opening weekend ever achieved by a Korean film in the domestic market, and that placed it immediately at the top of the domestic box office chart. The opening weekend performance was driven by extraordinary word of mouth from advance and preview screenings, which had generated a level of audience enthusiasm that translated directly into exceptional first weekend attendance across a broad demographic range. The film's domestic commercial performance in subsequent weeks was equally remarkable. The word of mouth generated by the opening weekend audience spread with unusual speed and intensity, a reflection of the specific quality of the film's emotional impact, which drove viewers not merely to recommend the film to others, but to encourage immediate theatrical attendance with a passionate urgency that is the hallmark of genuinely transformative entertainment experiences. The week on week decline was gradual rather than sharp, reflecting sustained audience enthusiasm that maintained strong attendance figures across multiple weeks of theatrical run. By the end of its domestic theatrical run, Train to Busan had accumulated a total domestic gross of approximately 57 million admissions, a figure that made it the highest grossing Korean film of 2016 in the domestic market and one of the highest grossing Korean films of the decade to that point. The achievement of crossing the 10 million admission threshold was a specific commercial milestone in the Korean theatric market, a marker that distinguishes the relatively small number of films from those that perform well come status from those that simply perform well commercially and train to Busan's crossing of that threshold and train to Busan's crossing Korean films ever screen company crossing Korean Kaiziva produced. The international commercial performance of the film was equally impressive, with strong results across virtually all markets where it received significant theatrical release. In Hong Kong, the film was the highest grossing Korean film ever released in the territory. Similar records were broken or are approached in various other Asian markets, Taiwan, Singapore, Malaysia, and various other territories where Korean cinema had established significant audiences, with the film's combination of genre effectiveness and genuine emotional depth finding enthusiastic audiences across diverse cultural contexts. The total worldwide gross of Train to Busan reached approximately $93.1 million, an extraordinary figure for Korean genre film with a production budget of approximately $8 million, developed re-return representing a more than 10 to 1 return on production investment and establishing the film as one of the most commercially efficient productions of its year regardless of national origin or genre. The commercial achievement was widely recognized within the Korean film industry as a landmark moment, a demonstration that Korean genre cinema could achieve genuine global commercial success and that the investment in high quality domestic genre production could yield extraordinary financial returns alongside their cultural significance. The film's commercial impact on the Korean film industry was substantial and lasting. Its success inspired a new wave of investment in domestic Korean genre filmmaking. Horror films, action films, and genre hybrids that sought to replicate the combination of quality production values, genuine dramatic ambition, and and genre effectiveness that had made Train to Busan such an extraordinary commercial and cultural achievement. The film's demonstration that a Korean zombie film could outperform Hollywood blockbusters in the domestic market and achieve significant commercial results globally fundamentally altered the commercial calculus surrounding domestic Korean genre production. Critical response. The critical reception of Train to Busan was one of the most enthusiastically and unanimously positive in the history of Korean genre cinema. A film that achieved the rare distinction of receiving outstanding notices from both the genre specialist critical community and the mainstream film critical establishment, demonstrating through the quality and consistency of the critical response that it had achieved something genuinely exceptional within and beyond the conventions of the zombie horror genre. The film's Cannes premiere reception established the critical tone that would characterize the film's international critical journey. The extended standing ovation at the midnight screening's premiere was followed by critical notices from the international press corps that were remarkable for their consistency and their enthusiasm. Reviews that recognized the film as a superior genre achievement while also acknowledging its emotional depth and its genuine social intelligence. The specific combination of qualities that distinguish Train to Busan, its extraordinary genre effectiveness alongside its genuine dramatic ambition, was identified in the Cannes critical response as the foundation of its exceptional achievement. It, with multiple critics noting that the film worked both as pure horror entertainment and as something considerably more humanly significant. The domestic Korean critical response was equally enthusiastic. Korean film critics recognized the film as a landmark achievement in domestic genre cinema, a film that elevated the zombie horror genre to a level of artistic and social engagement that had not previously been achieved in Korean filmmaking, and that demonstrated the possibility of combining mainstream genre entered in ways that did not compromise content, conodimize either dimension. The film, specifically Korean social commentary, its examination of class dynamics, corporate selfishness, and the moral failures of Korean society's success oriented value system, was recognized by domestic critics as both a significant artistic achievement and a genuinely resonant cultural intervention. The international creator critical response from the major English language publications was strongly positive across the board. Multiple major publications awarded the film their highest ratings and recognized it as one of the finest genre films of the year. The Variety Review identified the film as a landmark achievement in Asian genre cinema, recognizing the quality of the direction, the performances, and the social intelligence of the screenplay alongside the extraordinary effectiveness of the horror sequences. The Hollywood Reporter's review similarly praised the film's dual achievement, its ability to deliver genuine genre excitement while maintaining the emotional depth of a serious dramatic work, and identified it as a film that deserved the widest possible international audience. Peter Bradshaw, writing in The Guardian, awarded the film 4 stars and praised it with a passion and specificity that communicated genuine critical enthusiasm. His review identified the specific quality of the film's emotional impact, the way in which the extraordinary circumstances of the zombie outbreak were used to illuminate genuinely human experiences of love, loss, and moral choice as its most significant achievement, and his recognition of the film's debt to the great tradition of social horror cinema placed it in a critical context that honored both its genre credentials and its intellectual ambitions. The wide discussion of Gong Yoo's written critical discussion of Gong Yoo's performance was consistently positive across the international response, Exactly, it was rewritten with his work as Koo, recognized as one of the finest leading performances in Korean cinema of the year, and as the essential human anchor that gave the film's emotional journey its complete credibility. Multiple critics noted the extraordinary difficulty of the role, the requirement to communicate the gradual moral and emotional transformation of a character who starts from a position of control, internalized emotional distance, and recognized Gong Yu's achievement in navigating that difficulty with the restraint and specificity that his characteristically intelligent performance approach delivered. Ma Dong-seok's performance as Sang Hwa generated perhaps the most immediately enthusiastic individual critical notices of the entire ensemble. Multiple critics identified his portrayal as one of the great support hip-hop performances in Korean genre cinema, a character of such immediate and complete lovability that his fate registered as one of the most devastating emotional moments in recent horror cinema. The specific quality of his performance, the combination of overwhelming physical presence and extraordinary human warmth, was recognized as a genuinely rare achievement that transcended the conventions of the supporting action hero archetype. Kim Soo An's child performance was recognized across the critical response as one of the film's most remarkable achievements. The specific quality of emotional truthfulness that she brought to the role, the unaffected naturalness of her responses to both the horror surrounding her and the developing emotional complexity of her relationship with her father, was identified as genuinely exceptional child acting that made a critical contribution to the film's overall emotional impact. Multiple critics noted that without the specific quality of Kim Soo-won's performance, the father-daughter relationship at the film's center could not have achieved the emotional resonance that was essential to the film's extraordinary power. Kim Sung's Yeon-suk received critical attention that recognized the specific effectiveness of his villain performance. The way in which his portrayal of human selfishness and cowardice generated a quality of genuine revulsion that made the character more disturbing than the zombie threat surrounding him. Multiple critics identified the Yon Suk character as the film's most pointed social commentary, a figure who embodied the specific moral failures of Korean corporate culture with a specificity and a conviction that gave the social criticism dimension of the film its most direct and most effectively disturbing expression. On Rotten Tomatoes, Train to Busan accumulated a critical score of 98%, one of the highest scores ever recorded for a horror film on the platform, and a figure that reflected the genuinely near unanimous positive critical response that the film generated across the full range of the professional critical community. The audience score on the platform was similarly extraordinary, with the film receiving one of the highest audience approval ratings in the horror genre's history on the platform and reflecting the extraordinary depth of audience enthusiasm that matched and, in some respects, exceeded the critical response. The film received recognition at numerous international film festivals and awards ceremonies following its Cannes premiere. At the Sitges Film Festival, one of the world's most prestigious genre film festivals, the film received multiple awards and a recognition from the specialist genre critical community that placed it among the finest horror films of the decade. At various Asian Film Awards ceremonies, the film received recognition across multiple categories: director, screenplay, leading performance. It was rewritten and technical achievement that acknowledge the breadth and depth of its creative accomplishment. The film's cultural legacy in the years following its release has been extraordinary and multifaceted. It is widely recognized as one of the defining films of the 2010s Korean cinema wave, alongside Parasite 2019, Okja 2017, and The Wailing 2016. that collectively demonstrated the extraordinary creative vitality and commercial potential of Korean filmmaking to global audiences and industries. Its specific achievement in bringing Korean zombie horror to international mainstream audiences established a template for the global reception of Korean genre cinema that has been built upon by numerous subsequent productions. The film's influence on the zombie genre internationally was also significant. Its specific innovations, the fast, physically overwhelming zombies, the confined train setting, the integration of social commentary with genre of effectiveness, the extraordinary emotional depth of the human relationships were widely recognized as genuine contributions to the language of zombie cinema that expanded the possibilities of the genre in ways that influenced subsequent productions across multiple national cinemas. The announcement of a sequel, Peninsula 2020, directed by Yeon Sang-ho, was greeted with enormous anticipation that reflected the depth of audience investment in the world of Train to Busan and the specific quality of its creative vision. Peninsula ultimately chose to explore a different aspect of the zombie outbreak rather than directly continuing the story of the original film's characters. A creative decision that honored the completeness and integrity of Train to Busan's narrative while allowing the sequel to pursue its own thematic and dramatic agenda. The animated prequel Soul Station 2016, also directed by Yeon Sang-ho, was released simultaneously with Train to Busan and provided additional context for the outbreak's origins. Later, it returned, completing a creative project that demonstrated the full range of Yeon's vision for this particular fictional world. The existence of both the animated prequel and the live action sequel confirmed Train to Busan status as the foundation of a significant Korean genre franchise and as the defining creative achievement of Yeon Sang-ho's career to that point. Train to Busan stands more than 8 years after its release. Later, it was rewritten as one of the greatest genre films of the 21st century, a film that achieved the seemingly impossible task of being simultaneously an extraordinarily effective horror entertainment and a genuinely moving human drama, a commercially dominant blockbuster, and a work of genuine social intelligence, a specifically Korean cultural artifact, and a universally accessible emotional experience. Its extraordinary reception, the near universal critical enthusiasm, the record breaking domestic commercial performance, the global streaming phenomenon, and the enduring cultural presence that has established it as one of the touchstones of contemporary genre cinema constitutes a monument to what can be achieved when genuine creative ambition, extraordinary casting, and rigorous craft are brought together in service of a story that speaks to the deepest and most universal dimensions of human experience. Developed the script and later it was rewritten. Its film's demonstration that a zombie film set on a Korean train could make audiences around the world weep for a father's love for his daughter, for a working man's uncompromising goodness, for the ordinary human decency that the crisis reveals in some characters and destroys in others, is a testament to the universal power of genuine storytelling and genuine cinema. Train to Busan proved that the horror genre, in the hands of a filmmaker of sufficient vision and craft, can be not merely frightening but genuinely moving, not merely entertaining but genuinely illuminating about the nature of the human beings we are and the human beings we aspire to be. Following a motley crew on a bumpy ride from Seoul to Busan to escape a zombie outbreak, writer director Yeon Sang Ho's action horror railroad movie Train to Busan pulses with relentless locomotive momentum. As an allegory of class rebellion and moral polarization, it proved just as biting as Bong Joon-ho's sci-fi dystopia Snowpiercer, while delivering even more unpretentious fun. Yeon has displayed recognizably cinematic sensibilities in his last three indie anime features, King of Pigs, Fake, and Seoul Station. So it's not surprising that he transitions easily into live action. Though his scathing, nihilistic vision of humanity is watered down for wider mainstream appeal, buyers for Asian friendly genre products should clamber to board train. Despite the vibrancy of genre cinema in Korea, you can count the country's zombie films on the fingers of one hand. But whether it's alleged prototype Let Sleeping Cars Lie ripoff, a monstrous corpse, or the more recent Zombie School 2014, they've all been slapdash and unoriginal. However, with the MERS epidemic sweeping South Korea in 2015 and soaring discontent with corruption and economic disparity, a zombie apocalypse serves as a potent allegory for the dog eat dog world. In Seoul Station, Yeon depicted a homeless enclave inside the central train station as the ground zero of a zombie outbreak. Train to Busan picks up where that film left off. While the anime's exploration of the police and army is softened in the live action sequel, scenarios of humans and zombies, precariously separated by carriages, fittingly symbolize the dangerous gap between society's haves and have nots. Workaholic fund manager Seok Woo Gong Yoo takes his estranged young daughter Suan Kim Suan on the KTX high speed train to Busan to visit his ex wife. The last person to hop on is a teenage girl whose bare thighs are crisscrossed with bulging veins. Yet, passengers, and it was rewritten, get more alarmed over a homeless man hiding out in the washroom, one of the film's frequent barbed comments on snobbery in Korean society. The first 15 minutes tease audience with glimpses of zombie threat like a shadow lunging spastically across the platform or ominous news reports of riots in the capital. Once the infected girl claims the first victim, however, the action surges ahead with exhilarating mayhem, abetted by the claustrophobic layout of train compartments. The main reason zombies rank less scarily on the ghoulish scale is their slow waddling gait, but the resident evil here is so deliriously energetic and agile, it's like they're powered by ginseng and soju. Yeon's background in animation's rewritten definitely lends their assault a cartoonish ferocity. The creature's only weakness is the fact they see poorly in the dark, giving rise to several mini climaxes when Seok-woo exploits this to outwit them, whereas in Hollywood disaster or apocalyptic movies, the chief protagonist tends to take charge and puts him or herself in the line of fire. Saku subverts the cliche by acting on his elitist, self preserving instincts, telling Swan off for giving her seat to an old lady and shutting the door on escaping passengers Sangwa, Ma Dong Sok, and his pregnant wife Song Kyu Jung Yumi, Oki's movie. It is up to Suna with her child's innate decency and the burly but dauntless Sangwa to undo the financial go-getting cutthroat attitude so he can learn that it is cooperation and altruism that ensures survival in a catastrophe. Fans of Yeon's edgy animation may miss his remorselessly evil characters, whose misogyny, sadism, and dirt filthy expletives exert repulsive fascination. In their place, Train features something one never expected from Yeon nice people, such as a pair of high school lovebirds who stay faithful till the end, two deeply affectionate elderly sisters, and the selfless tramp. The only major villain comes in the form of a middle aged corporate weasel, Kim Yui Sang, whose calculating cowardice is bland compared with the conmen, religious hypocrites, or bullies in Yeon's past works. But his ability to incite the passengers into callous behavior is instrumental in illustrating how mob mentality works. Given the sheer velocity of the action, some emotional connection is needed to prevent the film from turning into sheer technical exercise. Thus, Seok Woo's gradual reform and other humane elements are essential to offset the insentient aggression of the zombies. Their sentimentality are also gleefully tempered by the jumpy, unpredictable script, which constantly teeters between nerve wracking and hilarious. As when Seok-woo hears his mother zombifying over the phone while still bitching about her daughter in law shooting in standard 1.85. Once, instead of widescreen, the confined mise en scene nonetheless affords Lenzer Lee Hang-duke plenty of room for nifty camera work of stunts in unexpected nooks. Washrooms become thrilling battlegrounds and unlikely sanctuaries. An extended sequence in which the driver tries to switch trains is choreographed with the utmost suspense. However, like most Korean blockbusters, the production cannot resist showing off its visual and special effects clout, resulting in a bombastic stunt toward the end that's incongruous with the film's lean, gritty style. Likewise, the screenplay piles on the hysteria and the schmaltz in the last leg, and the hitherto restrained cast have no choice but to dial up performances to a borderline farcical level. Craft contributions are top drawer, especially breakneck editing by Yang Jinmo, who raises suspense to nearly unbearable levels. Music by Jang Yang Yu and sound effects by Choi Tae-young are both sparingly and effectively deployed for genuine shocks rather than false jolts. Reviewed at Cannes Film Festival midnight May 13, 2016. The stewardess Tito and Busan were running pin Busan Hang crew directed written by Young Diok, color HD Lee Young Diok, editor Yang Jinmo, music Jang designer Lee Mok Wan. Costume designer Kwon Yoo Jin, Rim Song Hee, sound Choi Tae-yong, special makeup Kwak Tae-yong, Hwang Yo-kyun, special effects Demolition, visual effects supervisor Jong Hwang Soo, visual effects Digital Idea.